It's time for From the Short Grass with Trey, a golf podcast for those who love golf, struggle with golf, and just like to enjoy the outdoors and fellowship with friends, all while chasing a ball around trying to put it in a 4.25-inch diameter hole. From the Short Grass is brought to you by Stevens Incorporated, an independent financial services firm with the freedom to focus on what matters most. And by Beechwood Pinnacle Hotels. We partner with you to deliver high-yield results by managing, developing, and investing in top-quality hospitality assets. And now, from the Short Grass, here is your host, Trey.
Welcome to another edition of From the Short Grass. I am your host, Trey. If you love history and the history of the game of golf, these next two episodes are specifically for you. When I traveled to Scotland back in March, I sat down with Peter Dawson, former Secretary and Chief Executive Officer of the RNA. But before I sat down with him, I traveled to Muirfield, just outside of Gullen, Scotland, and sat down with Robin Dow, a member of the Honourable Company of Edinburgh Golfers. Why you say the HCEG is so important to the game of golf? Well, in 1774, the Edinburgh Council formally agreed with the Gentlemen Golfers of Leith, which would later be renamed the Honourable Company of Edinburgh Golfers, to provide a silver club to be played for annually on Leith links. In March of that year, the Gentlemen Golfers wrote the Articles and Laws in Playing at Golf. They were the original rules of the game, 13 of them, and there is a copy of the original rules of golf that are displayed in the dining room inside the clubhouse at Muirfield. In fact, it is a high-quality reproduction, as the 1744 original document has been passed by the club to the National Library of Scotland for safekeeping. The 13 articles, as the rules have become known, were historically kept safely in the back of the first minute book. Many clubs have adjusted the rules for their own use in competitions, but that happened before the RNA formally took them over in 1897, and the RNA published the first national set of rules in 1899. That silver club that was awarded in 1744, it is in the dining room as well, and it is the original silver club, the oldest trophy in golf. You're going to hear a lot about who won that first silver club and much more in this episode of From the Short Grass as I sit down with Robin Dow. Robin is a past captain of the Honourable Company of Edinburgh Golfers, and he and I had a chance to sit down inside the clubhouse at Muirfield. You are going to enjoy these next two episodes. But first, it's part one with Robin Dow when we come back after the break. When you need an overnight place to stay, make sure it's a Beechwood Pinnacle Hotel. How do you do that? Go on the web, bphotels.com, and find one of their hotel properties that is close to where you need to stay. Matthew Allen and Blair Allen. They know how to manage hotel properties. Beechwood Pinnacle Hotel Group, a great sponsor of From the Short Grass. Find them on the web at bphotels.com. I'm back with part one of my sit-down interview with Robin Dow after this.
Strength is measured not by the number of accounts. Strength is placing value on relationships. It's having the vision and the guts to invest in growth. It's the commitment to responsibly manage your money. At Stevens, we believe that our strengths build success, not only for us, but for our clients. Stevens, member NYSE, SIPC.
Heading to El Dorado to check out some live music or to play Mystic Creek? Stay at the Haywood, the only boutique hotel in the middle of downtown and the Murphy Arts District. If you are spending a weekend in Hot Springs, make plans now at the Marriott Courtyard close to Lake Hamilton and Oaklawn. Beechwood Pinnacle Hotel Group manages both of these fine properties, and you will rest easy knowing that your every need is taken care of. Beechwood Pinnacle Hotels on the web at bphotels.com.
Welcome back to this edition of From the Short Grass. I don't want to keep you waiting. I really believe that my interview with Robin Dow is some of the best information and history in the game of golf that I've been able to get on this podcast since its inception. So without further ado, on the tee, a member of the Honourable Company of Edinburgh Golfers, past captain of the club, and a historian on the game of golf, Robin Dow.
Mr. Dow, thanks for joining me on From the Shortgrass, the Honourable Company of Edinburgh Golfers. You're a member of that. That's fantastic.
Yeah, I am a member. I've been delighted to have been a member for not quite 40 years, but nearly. My father was a member. I'm a past captain of the club. I mean, it is the most wonderful experience to be here.
Do you remember the first time you ever picked up a golf club and fell in love with this game?
Well, yes, because I was born and brought up into a golfing family, and my father was a very good golfer, my brother was a very good golfer, and we lived next door to a golf course. I could literally jump over the fence at the bottom of our garden, and I was on the putting green, so I had no excuse.
That had to be fun growing up.
It was fantastic. I started, my parents would take hickory shafted golf clubs. They'd cut them down just literally with a saw. They'd re-grip them, and that's how I learned to play golf.
Wow. Let's go back 280 years, a little over 280 years ago, when a golf competition was held on the links of Leith that the Edinburgh Town Council agreed to present a silver club to the winner. How did that come about?
Well, it came about because our predecessors, who were the gentlemen golfers, and they played their golf on Leith links, and they had petitioned Edinburgh Council to put up a trophy for an annual competition. And the council agreed to give a silver club to be played for. However, they set up various conditions that the golfers had to agree to before they would receive the silver club. And the conditions included that they had to write rules by which the competition would be administered. They had to agree that the winner would become the captain. They had to agree that the captain would be responsible for the management of the links, for dealing with any disputes or debates about what had happened during the course of the tournament. The captain would be responsible for attaching a gold or a silver ball to the silver club, and so on. There were a number of these conditions. But on the 7th of March, this was all documented in a beautiful document which still exists, and we have a contemporary copy of it on the first pages of our minute book.
Wow. Amazing.
It is. It's astonishing. I mean, it is. I still get slightly jittery every time I talk about it.
I can imagine it, and I can see that in you right now. What was the links of Leith like? What was that course like?
Well, it was a 5-hole course, first of all. It was on ground which was links, and it really was links. Today it's been leveled. It was leveled in the 1870s, so today it's like a manicured, public area. But in those days it was true links land. They had these 5 holes. Every single hole was longer than 400 yards. And they played with the equipment of the day, obviously, which was hickory-shafted clubs with feathery balls. So, and a match was 3 times round 5 holes. So, boy, when you'd done that, you'd had a game of golf.
I was going to say, how many strokes would it take you to get around that?
Well, the records are not brilliant, but the information that we do have is twofold. First of all, it seems that the average score would be somewhere between 5 and 6 shots per hole. But we have to remember that in those days, the greens, if you were lucky, were as good as the fairways that we would play on today. So that's one statistic. The other is that in our dining room, we have a beautiful, beautiful little object, which is a silver pocket watch. The silver pocket watch was presented by the treasurer of the club for a prize for the longest drive competition in 1790 on Leith links.
Wow.
And the winner hit the feathery ball with a long-nosed spoon 231 yards. I mean, it's astonishing. It's astonishing that we know that. It's astonishing that the watch still exists. It's the most beautiful piece, and it's just another fantastic part of the Honourable Company's history.
John Rattray, who was a surgeon, won the first competition, and he became the captain of golf.
Correct.
What does captain of golf entail?
Well, at that time, it meant that he was in charge of all club affairs. So he was in charge of the management of the links, to make sure the links was kept in decent condition, that whatever needed to be done to maintain it was taken care of. He was involved in any disputes or debates that there might be about particularly rules issues. He was the chairman of the board, if you like. They did have a council, they did have a committee, and he was the person who convened meetings, who, he was the chairman of the board. He managed the club in a supervisory role.
Also, when you talk about John Rattray, golf probably saved his life.
Yes, it's hard to believe that in 1744 a game of golf could save somebody's life, but let me assure you it's true. Rattray was a very well-known and eminent figure in Edinburgh, where he lived. He was a surgeon, he was a archer, and the archers were important in that they formed the royal bodyguard in Scotland. I mean, it was ceremonial in the sense that, you didn't defend the king or queen with a bow and arrow anymore, but it was a ceremonial role. And he was an archer, he was a golfer. And as it happened in 1744, when the first golf competition was played, he won it, and so he's the first winner of the Silver Club. In the same year, he won the top archery competition, so he won the Silver Arrow. So as I mentioned earlier, I think his mantelpiece must have been pretty impressive in 1744.
Yeah, I would say so.
However, he supported the Jacobite cause, and the Jacobites believed that the kings of Scotland and England, the United Kingdom, that they should be from a particular line of descent. And there was a exactly opposing view that the kings and queens of Scotland and England and the United Kingdom should be from the Hanoverian descent. And the man who was probably best remembered as the leader of the Jacobite cause had the name Bonnie Prince Charlie. He was Prince Charles, and he saw himself as the rightful contender to the throne. And Bonnie Prince Charlie, who had been living in Europe, in France and Italy, he came back to Scotland, raised an army, and set about trying to establish his claim to the throne. It went very well at the beginning, but he was very unsuccessful in a major battle at Culloden near Inverness in 1746, and the Jacobites lost heavily. Now, John Rattray was the Surgeon General to Bonnie Prince Charlie's army, and so John Rattray, was on the wrong side of a losing cause in a royal battle. And if you're in that situation, what happens is you're tried for treason, and the penalty for treason is hanging. So Rattray, as a result of his royal and political affiliations, he could see his life thread ticking away. However, he had a very good friend called Duncan Forbes. Duncan Forbes was the Lord Advocate in Scotland. He was the chief law officer. Duncan Forbes was on the other side, but he had such an affection for Rattray, he felt it was his duty to try and have Rattray's sentence reprieved. So he persuaded the powers that be in London to release Rattray, to let him return to Scotland, which happened. And lo and behold, in 1751, Rattray won the Silver Club again. But he might well have been hanged had Forbes not intervened on his behalf.
He won the Silver Club 3 times.
He did.
The first time?
1744. Then he won in 1745, so he won in consecutive years. Then because of this whole Battle of Culloden and all that stuff from 1746 onwards, he was on the sidelines. But then he did have this big comeback. He must have been a very happy man.
Golf saved his life.
Golf saved his life, and he had the resilience to live through all of that and come back and be the top golfer for a third time.
How important and impressive was that? How many of those first rules, you talked about the rules that the Honourable Company of Edinburgh Golfers came up with.
Yes.
How many of those do we still use today? You've walked me around the clubhouse and you showed me those rules, and I see some of them that I still play with today.
Well, first of all, I would say that the spirit of the rules that they wrote in 1744 exactly permeates golf today. In terms of the precise rules, I think about half of them you can directly translate. In those rules is the notion of a penalty shot if you get into something where you have to lift the ball out. If you lose the ball, there's a penalty shot built into the rules. They had all of those concepts from the very beginning. They had other slightly odd things, like you had to tee up your club within 2 club lengths of the hole when you were driving off on the next hole. So that, obviously we would never think of doing that today, but that was just a reflection of the nature of the course and the fact that, most shots were played with wooden clubs at that time.
Is there any recorded history of the discussion of the rules? Was there banter back and forth?
We don't know, but we do know that the rules evolved quite considerably from the 1744 original rules. There were revisions every 20 or 30 years. And when you read the minutes, you can see that quite often discussions about the rules were figuring, around the board table. And then they would rewrite, they'd make a revision. And as golf developed, as they understood more about what you had to legislate for on the golf course, the rules unfolded. And of course, inevitably, they became longer and they became more complicated.
The book became a little bit thicker.
It did.
The silver club
Yes.
that was awarded,
Yes.
it's still around, and you guys have it here inside the clubhouse at Muirfield.
When you have lunch in the clubhouse at Muirfield, you are within a few feet of the oldest trophy in the world of golf, and that is the original silver club. And it sits there in a beautiful display case. It has the coat of arms of Edinburgh Council engraved on the head, along with the year 1744. And then the shaft is full of the silver balls that have been attached by all the captains who won the competition.
When did they have to go to a new club because of all of the captains attaching their silver balls to it?
I think the next one was in 1811, and then the third one in 1896, and then the fourth one in 1980.
When you sit in there and you eat lunch, do you just look around you, and is it hard to believe where you were sitting that the history of the game is right here in front of you?
It is hard to believe, and you do have to pinch yourself. And it's really when you tell the story to other people, as I'm doing now, you can't help getting excited about it because it's absolutely marvelous. I think the other thing that's really intriguing is that those predecessors of ours from 1744 and onwards, they had absolutely no idea of the legacy that they were creating. I mean, the amount of things that we've inherited from these people, not just in our club, not just at Muirfield, but in the world of golf, it's extraordinary. They created all of this wonderful stuff we have.
Really, I mean, we have them to thank.
We do.
For this. Members of the Honourable Club of Edinburgh Golfers, they started playing more and more people started playing, and so they had to move from Leith Links, and they moved to Musselburgh, and that's where the club relocated to the first time.
Correct. And they relocated to Musselburgh in the late 1820s, early 1830s. And there already was a golf course at Musselburgh. It was a 9-hole course. And so a match there was twice round the 9 holes. And Musselburgh, during the period from 1800 to 1850, it grew significantly. And I would say that in around 1850, Musselburgh was probably the most important place in the world of golf. You had a street that was called Golf Place, in which there were 4 clubhouses of very active golf clubs. You had a bunch of professionals who were based there, who were earning money in exhibition matches and so on. Those professionals were very often club and ball makers. So you had McEwen's, you had Gourlay making ball, you had all kinds of important people in golf. One tidy little story that I love is, if you today, no matter where in the world you play golf, the golf hole is 4 1/4 inches in diameter. Now, the reason for that is a Musselburgh greenkeeper got fed up hand cutting the hole, and they sort of cut it with some hand implement, and he created a circular punch that you could punch out a hole with. And it just so happened that the thing that he had was 4¼ inches in diameter.
Wow.
So there's another beautiful piece of history that we don't claim, but Musselburgh claims. I mean, it's beautiful.
But the club,
Yes.
I mean, back in the day, there were different clubs that would play at these places, though, unlike today where if you say, okay, I'm going to play like back home, Chenal Country Club, that's one club. You don't have multiple clubs playing their golf on that course, if you will.
No, one of the things that our predecessors learned from playing on Leith, which then became too busy with so many things happening, and then at Musselburgh with so many other clubs playing there, that they absolutely wanted to be in control of their own golf, in control of their own destiny. And that was really the motivation to move to Muirfield. It was to say, let's move to somewhere where we're not beholden to anybody else. We can play our own golf on our own golf course in our own time and have our own clubhouse and take it from there. And that was the reason for these various moves.
The Claret Jug was introduced to the game of golf because the pros wanted to play with the amateurs.
Well, the pros wanted an open competition. There had been in St Andrews a competition called the Grand National, and the Grand National was extremely popular, but it was exclusively for amateurs, and it was played in the 1850s, late 1850s, and the pros were discommoded that they weren't allowed to compete. And so Tom Morris in 1860, who was the keeper of the green at Prestwick, he said, we must have an open competition. And so the first Open was held at Prestwick in 1860. Professionals competed, and that was the establishment of the Open Championship. It wasn't a Claret Jug just then. It was a leather belt and with silver buckles on it.
Then how did we get to the Claret Jug?
What happened was that the original rules for the Open Championship defined that if someone won the belt 3 times, they were entitled to keep it. And young Tom, he won 3 times. Actually, he won 4 times, but he won 3 times, so he kept the belt. So in 1872, Prestwick, the Royal and Ancient, and the Honourable Company each subscribed £10 to an Edinburgh silversmith who was commissioned to make the Claret Jug. And so the Claret Jug was then played for, I think for the first time in 1872.
Wow. That's the history. Oh, my gosh. How many championships did Musselburgh host? Open championships?
6. There were 6. And I think the first one was in 1883, maybe, or 1873.
Mm-hmm.
But they rotated on a specific rotation in those days. So it would be Musselburgh, Prestwick, St Andrews, Musselburgh, Prestwick, St Andrews. So the Open came around every 3 years. There was no, nothing interfered with that. And the only reason it moved from Musselburgh was because the Honourable Company moved from that home to the current home at Muirfield in 1891, and the first Open was held at Muirfield in 1892.
And so moving here, obviously, it afforded them, you've got 18 holes here. But you had 15 at the beginning, correct?
We had 16.
That's right.
I don't actually understand why Tom Morris laid out a golf course with 16 holes. But within months of him doing that, he added another 2 holes. So it became 18 holes very quickly. And within less than a year of the course opening, the first Open Championship was held here. You can't imagine that happening today. It's just inconceivable. But somehow or another, they managed to create this golf course that was good enough to hold an Open Championship in such a short time.
How popular was golf in the late 1800s when all of this transition was happening?
I can say this. In 1891, when the club moved from Musselburgh to Muirfield, we had 441 members. So that's quite a significant number at that time. It shows that there had been an explosion in golf. And the explosion in golf was caused by the fact that the price of equipment became reduced dramatically. A feathery ball was very expensive to make, and that's what they played with in 1744. By the end of the 18th century and 19th century, you had rubber and composite and all kinds of other balls that, first of all, you could hit much further. Secondly, they were much easier to control. And thirdly, they were much cheaper. Secondly, golf clubs weren't mass-produced, but there were very many more people making them. And so it was a more automated process, less labor-intensive. And so that gave access to a lot more people to play just on the basis of economics. Golf courses became much more prevalent too. So golf exploded in the second half of the 19th century.
Moving to Muirfield, the club voted. How did that go over?
There were at least 10 years of debates about moving. Not just moving, because I think people gradually accepted the principle of moving because Hounourable really was becoming too congested. But it was, where shall we move to? And there were numerous sites that were looked at and rejected. There were two or three key considerations. The first was that having played on a links at Leith and a links at Musselburgh, the club wanted to move to links land for its own home. That was fundamental. Secondly, it had to be somewhere where, if you were moving outside of Edinburgh and outside of the city boundary and down the coast, it had to be, you had to be able to reach it you had to be able to get there without too much difficulty. So that was a pretty fundamental consideration. And thirdly, we wanted it to be where, we had total control of the golf course and the surroundings. Those were the three considerations.
The first Open Championship that was held here was the first one to be held over 72 holes.
Right.
How important was that?
Well, I think it was a reflection of the growing up of golf as a professional game. Mm-hmm. Golf had by then been around for a long time, but the professionals really only started to become significant in the middle of the 19th century, and they played a lot of exhibition matches for a lot of money, actually. But tournament golf, if we can call it that, was really just developing. And quite clearly, if it was the most important competition that you played in and there was big prize money, if it was over 2 rounds, you didn't really have a chance to if you'd had a bad draw in terms of weather, or you'd had a bad round in terms of you'd played and there were only 2 rounds, you didn't really have much chance to come back. 4 rounds kind of equalized the rough with the smooth much more. And so it was a fairer way of doing it.
Speaking of the weather, today as we sit here looking out over Muirfield, the weather has not been cooperating with you today. I mean, you wanted to play an early 9 holes this morning and couldn't get that in.
Yes, I mean, this is pretty disgusting today. I have to say we're lucky because our course is arranged that you have a first tee very close to the clubhouse and you have a 10th tee very close to the clubhouse. So you can play the front 9 or the back 9 or both very simply. So today we were going to play 9 and then have lunch, then play the other 9. As it is, we're now going to have lunch and play 9.
Hopefully the weather does improve. But I did hear a gentleman say earlier that, well, you can see the sea now, so the weather is improving.
Yes, but still you can't see Fife. And that's really the test, I think.
Heading to El Dorado to check out some live music or to play Mystic Creek? Stay at the Haywood, the only boutique hotel in the middle of downtown and the Murphy Arts District. If you are spending a weekend in Hot Springs, make plans now at the Marriott Courtyard close to Lake Hamilton and Oaklawn. Beechwood Pinnacle Hotel Group manages both of these fine properties, and you will rest easy knowing that your every need is taken care of. Beechwood Pinnacle Hotels on the web at bphotels.com.
That's all the time for part 1 of my sit down with Robin Dow. Part 2 comes your way in our next episode next week. I want to thank you as always for listening. If you've missed any of our live episodes of From the Shortgrass, you can find it wherever you get your podcast and even on YouTube as well. Go to our YouTube channel, From the Shortgrass. Remember, when you find your ball mark on the green, fix it and a couple of more. And I hope to see you sometime soon from the Shortgrass.
You've been listening to From the Shortgrass, a weekly podcast dedicated to the game of golf. This has been a presentation of the Buzz Radio Network.